If we don't show up until 2 minutes.
Well. All right. 6:30 having come and gone, I will call to order the common council meeting of Tuesday, March 7th, 2023, and ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Thank you. Alder Vitever.
Present.
Vitever is present. Alder Wahelia.
Here.
Wahelia is present. Alder Benford is excused. Alder Bennett. Here. Alder Bennett is present. Alder Carter.
Present.
Alder Carter is present. Alder Conklin.
Present.
Alder Conklin is present. Alder Curry. Here. Curry is present. Alder Evers.
Here.
Evers is present. Alder Figueroa Cole.
Here.
Alder Figueroa Cole is here. Alder Foster.
Present.
Foster is present. Alder Furman. Present. Alder Furman is present. Alder Harrington McKinney? Not yet. Alder Heck. Here. Alder Heck is present. Alder Madison? Not yet. Alder Miadze?
Present.
Miadze is present. Alder Paulson?
Here.
Alder Paulson is present. Alder Fair is excused. Madam Mayor, we have a quorum.
Thank you. As usual, I'll ask us to.
Actually, I don't think I was
I
called.
apologize. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Alder Tischler.
Yep, here.
He is present. Thank you, Alder Tischler. Alder Vetter, who's sitting right in front of me. Alder Vetter is present as well. Thank you very much. I'm sorry. Alder Veer, good start. All right.
We might do that a few more times through the night. So we do have a quorum, however. And a quorum having been established, I will remind us, as usual, that we're here to do the business of the people of the city of Madison and to ask everyone to try and do that with good intentions and kindness. Our first item tonight is a presentation. We're on occasion graced by our poet laureate, Angie Trudell Vasquez, who is with us on the Zooms tonight. And she will be introducing the presentation in item 1. Angie?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm so happy to introduce James P. Roberts. James is the author of 15 books in the fields of science fiction and fantasy, poetry, literary biography, and baseball history. His most recent poetry collection, 100 Breaths, was selected as the winner of the 2020 Portage Press Poetry Book Prize and was published by Portage Press in June of 2020. He is the current South Central Region Vice President of the Wisconsin Fellowship of Poets, and since 2020 has organized and hosted the annual, except for the 2021, Winter Festival of Poetry, an 8-week-long series of poetry readings held on Sunday afternoons from mid-January to mid-March. James lives in Madison, Wisconsin, where he haunts little free libraries and has recently developed a passion for playing disc golf. Please welcome poet James P. Roberts.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Or do I have to raise it up? Okay. Can you hear me now? Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, I'd like to thank Angie for the invitation to be with you here tonight. And I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to share some of my words. This poem is called In a Garden of Withered Flowers. She fingers my original Peter Max tie, liquid blue eyes set soft with wonder. Pretty, she murmurs, so pretty. Her name is Patty. She looks about 30, dark hair spilling over her face, her voice a bird's trill at dawn. Patty was the first of those I would meet as I arrived at the Adult Day Center to speak about poetry and help write a group poem. Loran, the facilitator, a bell-shaped woman with long, wavy, wheat blonde hair, urged Patty away from my tie, taking her by the hand and guiding her to a chair. As Loran introduced me, I surveyed the 24 people gathering, scattered around the dining room area. The old black woman, comfortable in a plush chair, calmly knitting. The legless bald man in the wheelchair, proud of his Green Bay Packers jersey. The thin young man with scraggly beard, looking like Jesus, but with empty eyes. The pale girl, not more than 20, her face perpetually mournful, holding a stuffed collie and would not let go. The blocky Asian woman of indeterminate age, wrapped in colorful garments like a bright-winged butterfly. People hungering to be noticed as people, hungering to escape, even for a moment, what affliction life or circumstance has brought upon them, hungering just to make it through another day. I read a few poems, then we started the group poem, Ode to Fall. Eager voices chimed in faster than Lorraine could write on the erasable board she had set up on an easel. The hour was over, much too quickly. The poem completed, it would be typed up and published in the Day Center newsletter. The Asian woman approached, hands folded, and began bowing. I was told that she was mute, could not speak. This was her way of showing appreciation. I bowed in return many times. For that one day, that 1 hour, I felt I had been a gardener tending to flowers, lovely, human flowers, not withered at all. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, James, and thanks you, Angie, for bringing poetry to us in these meetings. Very much appreciated. Our next item of business is an honoring resolution, item 2, which is Legistar 76487, celebrating March 8th, 2023 as International Women's Day in the city of Madison. And I apologize, I'm not sure if there is an alder who is prepared to read the resolution. Alder Wahili.
Madam Mayor, if I may, based on the resolution, if there are no people who are receiving it, we don't have to read.
All right, would you like to make the motion, Alder?
Yes.
Alder Wahili will move approval. And there's a second. Is there any objection to recording unanimous vote in favor? Seeing no objection, we'll record a unanimous vote in favor of item 2. Thank you, Alder. Are there any disclosures or recusals on tonight's agenda? Alder Paulson?
Yeah, I'm actually going to make an anti-recusal, just for and disclosure for folks that know on the Building Energy Savings Program grant in the Economic Development Committee. I'd been recusing myself out of an abundance of caution, but after a discussion with the city attorney and a review of my company's products, I work for Johnson Controls, an HVAC company, but after a review of our products, I'm more convinced that I don't have a conflict, and so I will be participating in the debate, though if you'd been following at EDC, I had been stepping out of that. So that's my disclosure.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Curry?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On agenda item 72, legislative file 75809, my employer YWCA Madison has an interest, but I do not work at the location that has interest, and it will not affect my vote.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Bennett?
Yes, on agenda item number 4, I need to disclose that I technically still work at Ian's, but not at this location, so it will not impact my vote.
Thank you, Alder. Any further disclosures or recusals? Seeing none, we'll move on to the presentation of the consent agenda. President Furman.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a long one, guys, so buckle up. Agenda items with a consent agenda is moved with the recommended actions listed for each item on the agenda, including public hearings, except 1, items which have registrants wishing to speak, 2, items which alders have separated out for discussion/debate purposes. Agenda items with recommendations different from the agenda. Agenda item 13, legislative file number 75510, amending map related to Genomic Drive, Mineral Point Drive, Charmony Drive, South Rose Road. This is an agenda correction. It's to adopt substitute. Agenda item 67, legislative file 75053, substitute a grant program related to accessible taxi cabs in Madison. The Finance Committee recommended action is to adopt, 15 votes required. Agenda item 68, legislative file 75503, relief from conditions of gifts and dedications related to property in the 12th Aldermanic District. The Finance Committee recommendation action is to return to lead with recommendation for approval. Agenda item 69, legislative file number 75795, TID number 36 amendment. Finance Committee recommended action is to adopt. Agenda item 70, legislative file 75798, TID number 37 amendment. Finance Committee recommended action is to adopt. Agenda item 71, legislative file 75808, TID number 42 amendment. Finance Committee recommended action is to adopt. Legislative file 75809, TID number 51 amendment. Finance Committee recommended action is to adopt. Agenda item 74, legislative file 75922, updated plan document for the city's 457 plans. Finance Committee recommended action is adopt. Agenda item 75, legislative file 76056, $57,000 grant from the CFE fund. Finance Committee recommended action is to adopt, 15 votes required. Agenda item 76, legislative file 76058, a $75,000 grant from the Wisconsin Division of Energy, Housing and Community Resources. Finance Committee recommended action is to adopt, 15 votes required. Agenda item 77, legislative file number 76059, a CDD contract with EQT by Design. Finance Committee recommended action is to adopt substitute. Agenda item 78, legislative file 76213, C4CS contract. Finance Committee recommended action is to adopt. Agenda item 79, legislative file 76393, extension of contracts between the City of Madison and several partner agencies. The Block Grant Committee recommended action is to return to the lead with recommendation for approval. The Finance Committee recommended action is to adopt. Agenda item 80, legislative file 76394, approving a loan to Literacy Network, Inc. The Community Development Block Grant Committee recommended action is to return with a recommendation for approval. The Finance Committee recommended action is to adopt. Agenda item 81, legislative file 76395, approving a substantial agreement to the city's FY21 annual action plan to include supplemental home ARP grant funds. Community Development Block Grant Committee recommended action is to return to lead with a recommendation for approval. Finance Committee recommendation action is to adopt, 15 votes required. Agenda item 82, legislative file 76401, approving federal community development block grant funds and American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 state and local physical relief funds. Community Development Block Grant Committee recommended action is to return to lead with recommendation for approval. The Finance Committee recommended action is to adopt. And item 85, legislative file 75901, creating a transportation commission. Transportation Policy and Planning Board recommended action is to return to the lead with the following recommendations: resident member instead of a regional representative, and one member is strongly recommended to be a member of the Sustainable Madison Committee. Transportation recommended action is to adopt with the following recommendations, which are the same: resident member instead of regional representative, and one member is strongly recommended to be a member of the Sustainable Madison Committee. Agenda item 86, legislative file 75910, MGO change for Green Street Initiative for responsibilities to the Transportation Commission. The Transportation Policy and Planning Board recommendation is to return to the lead with recommended action for approval. The Transportation Commission action is to adopt. Agenda item 87, legislative file 75842, repealing regulations about the sale and rental of bicycles. The Transportation Policy and Planning Board recommended action is to adopt. Legislative item 80, agenda item 88, legislative file 75846, repeal and reorganize penalty provisions regarding bicycles and off-road motor vehicles. The Transportation Policy and Planning Board recommended action is to adopt. Agenda item 89, legislative file 75847, repealing MGO about licenses for bicycle dealers. The Transportation and Policy Planning Board recommended action is to adopt. Items excluded by 1, requests of alders, or 2, due to speakers registered by 6:45 p.m. on March 7th. Agenda item 11, legislative file 76234, Davies Street and Dempsey Road Reconstruction Assessment District, 2023, 15th Aldermanic District, speakers registered. Agenda item 21, legislative file 75535, future street and highways in the city of Madison at the West Town Mall, speakers registered. Agenda item 66, legislative file number 75280, a substitute dealing with building energy savings code, report of the Economic Development Committee, speakers registered. It's being excluded for speakers registered, sorry. Agenda item 67, legislative file 75053, substitute establishing a grant program to support accessible taxis in Madison. It's been removed by request of Alder Keith Furman. Agenda item 85, legislative file 75901, creating a transportation commission. There are speakers registered. There are 3 items that are being introduced from the floor. The first one is legislative file 76645, supporting bargaining between office and professional employees, International Union, Local 39, and CUNA Mutual Group, from Alder Figueroa Cole. It's being referred back to the Common Council on March 21st. Legislative file 76649, by title only, authorizing the City of Madison to develop a comprehensive report to the crisis in home health care in Madison, Alder Vitiver. Not Vitiver, Vetter, sorry. I definitely need a drink of water in a moment. My apologies. Refer to the Common Council Executive Committee March 15th, and then come back here on the 21st to the Common Council. And then the last one is legislative file 76660 by title only, amending section 2.211 of the Madison General Ordinance to allow additional reconsideration opportunities. This will be referred to the Common Council Executive Committee on March 15th and refer to the Common Council on March 21st.
Okay, are there additional requests for exclusion from the consent agenda? Seeing none, let's go through that again, perhaps slightly more briefly. Thank you, President Furman, for yeoman's work there. So the first category is agenda items with recommendations different from the agenda. Item 13 is to adopt the substitute. Items 68, 69, 70, 71, 72, 74 are all to adopt. Items 75 and 76 are to adopt, but 15 votes are required. Item 77 is to adopt the substitute. Items 78, 79, 80 are to adopt. Item 81 is adopt, 15 votes required. Item 82 is to adopt, as is 86, 87, 88, and 89. The following items are excluded from the consent agenda. Items 11, 21, 66, 67, and 85. Then we have 3 items that are being introduced from the floor tonight. Legislative files 76645, 76649, and 7660. Everybody on the same page? Okay. President Furman?
Move adoption.
Moved and seconded to adopt the consent agenda. Are there questions? Is there discussion? Seeing none, is there any objection to recording a unanimous vote in favor of the consent agenda? Seeing no objection, we will record a unanimous vote in favor of the consent agenda. And we will move on to public comment. And our first item for public comment is item 11, which is approving plans, specifications, and a schedule of assessments for Davies Street and Dempsey Road Reconstruction Assessment District of 2023 in the 15th Aldermanic District. We have one registrant, Nicholas Davies of District 15, in support, wishing to speak. Do we have Nicholas with us? It does not appear that we have Nicholas in the room. Is Nicholas on the Zoom?
There's no one by that name in Zoom either.
Okay. We'll move on to item 21, which is amending.
He just showed up.
Oh,
Sorry, I was a bit late on that.
no worries. Go ahead, Nicholas. On
Yeah,
item 11.
Yes. So I was at the meeting last year about this project. The consensus there was that nobody wanted to see higher volumes and higher speeds on these streets. And the concern was that after repaving, on-street bike lanes would make the pavement wider, and you could narrow the lanes, but that wouldn't stop drivers from just driving over the lines and making the street, if anything, less safe for pedestrians and cyclists of all ages and abilities, including those who use this as part of the lake loop. So I liked the current design, minimizes tree removals, it keeps the street narrow and calm, it adds another off-street section to the lake loop. I see this path as being really useful for kids trying to get to school on Buckeye, trying to get to the library on Cottage Grove, trying to get to the park in between. I saw kind of the petition around this. I think there was some misunderstanding there. I mean, the costs of the path and the sidewalk aren't going to be kind of burdened by homeowners. The new assessment scheme, to my understanding, you're only assessed kind of travel lanes. And, the city's not going to be building on anyone's property. I think there's a couple instances of like fences that people have put in the public right of way, and that, because there hasn't been any need to move them, they've been allowed to be there for several years. And I think maybe there's some misunderstanding there. But yeah, I guess I really appreciate the work that the city folks have done on this design, and I hope that it gets approved tonight. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any questions for our registrant on item 11? Seeing none, thank you. Next item that we have a registrant on is item 21, which is amending the City of Madison official map to establish mapped reservations for future streets and highways in the City of Madison at West Town Mall and its environs, consistent with recommendations from the adopted Odana Area Plan. On this item, we have one registrant wishing to speak, Eric McLeod of District 4, representing CBL and Associates Properties. Do we have Eric?
Yes, I'm here, Madam Mayor.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Eric McLeod, and I represent CBL, the owner and operator of the West Town Mall. And I'm here to address the proposal to officially map public rights-of-way on the West Town property. We provided the city with 2 letters concerning this official mapping proposal. The first letter was sent on July 2021 and addressed our legal concerns related to officially mapping public roads through an existing developed commercial property, which is what West Town is. Second letter was sent a few weeks ago, and it simply encouraged the Plan Commission to remove the West Town property from the official mapping proposal related to the Odana area, noting that the negative impacts on West Town's ongoing and future development plans would be substantial. I won't restate the contents of those 2 letters, which are part of the record before you. I would, however, like to offer the following additional comments for your consideration. West Town Mall first opened nearly 52 years ago in the fall of 1970. During those 52 years, West Town has served the people of this community, and it has served them well. Retail shopping outlets and malls in particular have faced numerous challenges over the years, but Westtown has continued to succeed by responding to market demands and delivering what Madison residents want. Key to that success has been Westtown's ability to remain flexible as it develops new shopping and dining opportunities. Officially mapping future roads through Westtown's property will greatly restrict that flexibility and threaten Westtown's ability to respond to an ever-changing market. Simply put, a successful Westtown Mall is good for Madison. Westtown provides increased opportunities for Madison residents to shop locally rather than ordering more and more products from Amazon and other online sellers. The stores they shop at locally employ local residents. There are approximately 2,500 employees who work for businesses at the Westtown Mall property. Indeed, growing up on the southwest side of Madison, my first part-time job during high school was working at a shoe store in Westtown. Westtown Mall is on the move. It's growing and it intends to continue to serve this community for many years to come. The official mapping proposal will harm those efforts, and we strongly encourage you to reject that proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. We have no further registrants wishing to speak on this item. Are there questions for the registrant? Seeing none, thank you. And we'll move on to our next item, which is item 66, a substitute creating sections of the Madison General Ordinances to establish a building energy savings code and to update the bond schedule accordingly. Our first registrant on item 66 is David Tipson of West Main Street, representing Clean Wisconsin, to be followed by Kathy Kuntz. Do we have David? Do we have David on the Zoom?
There's no one by that name in Zoom either.
All right. Then Kathy Kuntz of District 4, representing the Dane County Office of Energy and Climate Change, to be followed by Tom Wilson.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Kathy.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm Kathy Kuntz. I'm the director of the Dane County Office of Energy and Climate Change. And I wanted to speak tonight in support of Madison's Building Energy Savings Program. So the county in 2020 issued a countywide climate action plan, setting goals both for our county operations and for reducing countywide emissions. Relative to our own operations, we've got 16 buildings that will be affected by the Building Energy Savings Program, and a dozen of those will be subject to the tune-up requirement as well as benchmarking. Neither of those things concern me because we already benchmark all of our buildings. Indeed, we benchmark buildings much smaller than 25,000 square feet, and we benchmark buildings outside of the city of Madison. We do that benchmarking because it saves us money on our utility bills and means we can spend more county dollars on important county priorities. We also are doing work to essentially accomplish what the tune-ups will accomplish. We're in the midst of a massive comprehensive energy assessment of all of our facilities. And one of the things that's happening there are tune-up initiatives, and my own experience in the energy efficiency industry convinces me that these tune-ups are a good plan. So we're appreciative that the city's approach is giving entities like us with lots of facilities the ability to lay out our own schedule for those updates and the tune-ups. That's a pretty important piece for us. We think that is well represented here. And then finally, I would just note that relative to our countywide goals to reduce emissions, this program is for the city of Madison a substantive step to contribute to both countywide goals and city goals on climate.
Thank you. Our next registrant is Tom Wilson of District 13, to be followed by Rex Locher.
Hi, I'm Tom Wilson. I'm calling in to support this measure. Sometimes we need a nudge to move in the right direction, and I think this legislation is just that, a nudge in the right direction. I spent most of the past 10 years performing energy audits and data analysis on large commercial and industrial buildings and their systems, including benchmarking and retro-commissioning, which is also known as building tune-ups. And I can say from that experience that building energy efficiency opportunities are some of the lowest hanging fruit available in our efforts to mitigate climate disruption and other externalized costs of energy waste. In addition to climate benefits, building owners and occupants often realize significant improvements in comfort, productivity, and cost reductions from implementing energy projects identified in audits and through periodic building tune-ups. In my experience, many owners and occupants are unaware of cost savings measures related to energy use because there is often a disconnect between the user of a space or system and the person who cuts a check to the utility. An example would be folks that work or maintain a factory, not necessarily paying an energy bill. It may be paid by someone who works in an office half the country or across the country. This can also occur because some systems are fairly complicated, and unless the facility employs someone specifically for this purpose, opportunities are often overlooked. As far as building tune-ups are concerned, many buildings are set up properly, but then someone changes the settings for one reason or another, whether it's to produce a certain thing a certain way or because they're uncomfortable. Buildings settings can be changed in a way that makes the efficiency less than optimal. So periodic building tune-ups help reset the system, make sure it's running optimally for the way the building is being used at a given time. And lastly, while most of my work was done through a state energy efficiency law, through utility, the customers that we worked for, when that was through, ended up coming back to us and hiring us directly because they saw the value in the work that we provided. They began to see that the energy efficiency improvements that we were working on with them actually were worth it outside of the state mandated program. So again, this is just that little nudge to move us in the right direction. So please support this. Thank you.
Thank you. The next registrant is Rex Loker of District 5, to be followed by Rachel Robillard. Do we have Rex?
Rex is not in Zoom either.
Okay. What about Rachel Robillard of District 9, to be followed by Susan Millar?
Hi, I'm here.
Go ahead.
Hi, thank you. My name is Rachel Robillard, and I'm a climate concerned citizen that lives on the far west side of Madison with my husband and my daughter. I've been following this ordinance closely, and I strongly urge you to support the Building Energy Savings Program. It's a simple, light touch program. It's a win-win for businesses and the wider community. This program is very similar to programs already enacted around 50 other cities, counties, and entire states. So Madison, in my opinion, if anything, is playing catch up. It uses simple, free benchmarking programs that's already used in nearly 25% of the US commercial buildings market. It's well documented, well supported, and it's easy to use. As for the largest buildings that are affected by the tune-ups, this program has built-in flexibility, allowing for ongoing input into the tune-up program, the qualifications accepted for the tune-up specialists, and additional ways businesses who already have energy efficiency programs can get an exemption. In fact, the city's already amended the program several times based on business community input. However, what they cannot do is make this voluntary. We know based on hard data that voluntary programs do not remotely have the participation levels required to start really reducing our emissions. Voluntary is the status quo, and it isn't cutting it. We're beyond the point of taking our time in reducing emissions and preparing our wider community for climate impacts. Wisconsin seasons are already changing. We need resiliency and reductions as soon as possible. And this bill rightly addresses the largest buildings in our community. The energy reductions I can do as a private individual pales in comparison to the impact these large buildings have. Climate change is what keeps me up at night, because once we've lost that battle, we can't go back. And I have a 7-year-old and I'm scared for her future. This program helps in simply providing information and guidance to businesses to have more efficient systems, to actually save money, and to make sure we can continue to address the energy needs of the entire community in a sustainable way. I think this should be an easy yes vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next registrant is Susan Millar of District 5, to be followed by Don Ferber.
Thank you. I am a resident of Madison's Alder District 5 and a member of 350 Wisconsin's Community Climate Solutions team. I want to say that I'm very impressed by the city staff, which has had hundreds of interactions with building owners who have expressed concern about the proposed building energy savings ordinance. And I want to emphasize that in response, the city staff has made many revisions that address these concerns. And in reading these revisions, I want to emphasize that this proposed ordinance does not require building owners to act on any of the building performance information they report, other than to adjust schedules and settings so that HVAC system functions as intended. And it does not make information about individual building energy performance public, except by explicit building owner permission. So the financial costs, as prior speakers have just pointed out, for building owners of meeting this ordinance's requirements are very small compared to the financial benefits. Because as building owners who are already benchmarking and doing tune-ups know, measuring results in low-cost fixing, and fixing results in lower energy bills, clean and comfortable building air, and greater ease of renting space to clients and selling their building. But these benefits, while good for building owners, are small compared to the benefit of helping reduce climate warming emissions, as Rachel just explained. Those benefits are for all of us because they help protect our atmosphere, our precious life-enabling commons. This is extremely important. The costs of not preserving our commons are unimaginably greater than the costs of preserving them. So I end by asking you, the wonderful alders of Madison, to support this "you can't fix what you don't measure and everyone benefits" ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next registrant is Don Ferber, representing the Four Lakes group of the Sierra Club and of District 15.
Yes, thank you very much. Appreciate this opportunity to speak. The Four Lakes group of the Sierra Club in South Central Wisconsin has about 2,000 members here in the Madison area. And we are strongly in support of this ordinance, which would reduce emissions in the community. Speaking a little bit bluntly, we're concerned that Madison is not living up to its progressive values that we proclaim all the time. That while the city itself is doing a fairly good job of moving ahead with energy reduction and adopting clean energy measures, it's only a very small percentage of the energy that we use in the community, and we need the community to start stepping up. These are large players in the community with these buildings that are benefiting from being in Madison and certainly ought to be forward-looking and setting standards that the rest of Madison can follow. We think it provides a much better image if you have buildings doing the right thing in terms of attracting the people we want to live here and the people who will benefit from living here. This would really help reduce energy use in our community. As has been pointed out, one of the lowest cost ways of doing that, and would reduce the costs of a lot of these businesses, which makes us really wonder why there is opposition to this. Who doesn't want to at least have the information, that ignorance can never be bliss here. And this provides information which is very usable and will help both the owners of the buildings and any tenants of the buildings to reduce their energy use in a positive way. Again, without even putting any demands on them, which many other cities are actually doing much more than what's being done here. So we think this is a very necessary, just first step, even in terms of what Madison needs to do at the community level and the private level in terms of reducing our emissions. So again, we strongly urge you to support this measure. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next registrant will circle back around and see if we have David Tipson from representing Clean Wisconsin. Yep.
Where should I go?
Right here. Right here. There you go.
Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony. My name is David Tipson, and I am Vice President at Clean Wisconsin. Clean Wisconsin is a nonprofit environmental advocacy organization working on clean water, clean air, and clean energy issues. We were founded over 50 years ago and have over 30,000 members. and supporters around the state. We employ scientists, policy experts, and attorneys to protect and improve Wisconsin's environment. I am also a Madison resident. Clean Wisconsin supports the Building Energy Savings Code. Annual benchmarking and regular building tune-ups are important and proven tools in reducing total carbon emissions. Building emissions are a significant contributor to climate change. According to the EPA, commercial and residential buildings contribute approximately 13% of total greenhouse gas emissions in the United States. As identified in file number 75280, commercial buildings alone contribute to approximately 30% of emissions in Madison, over double the rate of emissions from commercial and residential buildings combined nationally. Madison needs to address this significant disparity, and the initiatives detailed in the proposed Building Energy Savings Code have successfully reduced building emissions in other cities. For instance, New York City has a similar benchmarking requirement for buildings over 25,000 square feet. According to an analysis conducted by New York-based nonprofit Urban Green Council, total carbon emissions from affected buildings have decreased 23% since the law went into effect. The program has been so successful that the city is now considering a similar requirement for buildings over 10,000 square feet. Since adopting its own benchmarking law, Chicago has reported a 25% decrease in carbon emissions from affected buildings. Building tune-ups are also an important energy-saving strategy. By routinely evaluating and adjusting buildings' energy and HVAC systems, tune-ups ensure these systems operate at optimum efficiency. According to the City of Seattle, which enacted a tune-up ordinance in 2017, buildings that regularly undergo tune-ups should generate an average of 10 to 15% in energy savings. Clean Wisconsin thanks the authors for introducing this proposal, and we urge the Common Council to pass this necessary legislation swiftly. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll try once more for Rex Locher of District 5. Not in the room.
Rex is also not in Zoom.
Okay, thank you. All right, those are the registrants wishing to speak on item 66. Are there questions for any of the registrants on item 66? Seeing none. Thank you all. And we will move on to item 85. Item 85 is repealing sections of the Madison general ordinances and recreating other sections to create a transportation commission and amending sections to remove references to the Transportation Policy and Planning Board. On item 85, we have one registrant wishing to speak, Tom Wilson of District 13.
Hi, I'm Tom Wilson back here again. So just here to speak in favor of this. I'm, as many of you know, I'm chair of the Transportation Policy and Planning Board. The Transportation Commission and Transportation Policy and Planning Board had our joint meeting last night where we discussed this. Had a really, really good discussion. A lot of folks, myself included, who were not convinced of this a few years ago when we discussed it, definitely are convinced that now is the right time for this. So I'm here to answer questions. I certainly hope you support this. It passed both bodies with strong support. Well, thank you.
Thank you. We have no other registrants wishing to speak on item 85. Are there questions for the registrant? Seeing none, thank you. Oh, Alder Tischler, go ahead.
Yeah, just question is why is now the right time?
So I guess in my opinion, when the bodies were created, I think it was 4 or 5 years ago. I think it was 6 different bodies that were consolidated to make the 2, and it wasn't quite clear how those 2 would necessarily complete the different types of work they were assigned to do, and if they could do it together. And I think for us, it was important to kind of go through a couple of years and with the way that we had it and see that there was a lot of duplication among the 2 bodies. So I think one of the benefits of this for staff will be that they don't have to give the same presentations twice to 2 different bodies. So yeah, the duplication of things, we had to kind of see that and kind of go through that in order to get here. I guess that would be probably the strongest point.
Are there any additional questions? If not, Alder Harrington McKinney? Alder, would you just move your microphone down towards you? There you go.
Goes. All right, Tom, I just have one question because on the change, it talked about staggered terms, and I don't remember a discussion related to that. Would you share more information about the staggered terms?
Alder, I'm not quite sure about the question staggered terms. Is that staggered terms for members?
Yes, the substitute includes a staggering of terms for the new body.
It might be easier for the legislation's proposer to explain that better than I can.
Alder, anything further? We'll get there. Yeah. Thank you, Alder. Any further questions for the registrant? Seeing none, thank you. And that is the end of our public comment. So we'll go on to the items excluded from the consent agenda, starting with item 11. Item 11 is Legistar 76234, approving plan specifications and a schedule of assessments for Davie Street and Dempsey Road Reconstruction Assessment District of 2023 in the 15th Aldermanic District. President Furman?
Adopt with recommendations.
Moved and seconded to adopt with recommendations. Are there questions for staff on item 11? Is there discussion on item 11? Seeing none, is there any objection to recording unanimous vote in favor of item 11? Seeing no objection, we'll record a unanimous vote in favor of item 11 and go on to item 21. Item 21 is Legistar 75535, amending the City of Madison official map to establish mapped reservations for future streets and highways in the City of Madison at West Town Mall and its environs, consistent with the recommendations in the adopted Odana Area Plan. President Furman? Moved and seconded to adopt. On item 21, are there questions for staff? Alder Carter.
Yes, I would like to know, I can't think of the resident's name that spoke, but I would like to know how this roadmap, the Odana Area Plan, and the streets that are planned to go through this commercial area, what did we take in consideration on how that would affect that area?
Thank you, Alder. We have Planning Director Heather Stouter here.
Thank you, Alder. If it's okay, I'd just like to share one slide from a reference from the Odana Area Plan, which was adopted back in September of 2021. And just for reference for folks, this building here is the current West Town Mall main building, shown here in black. Back when we were working on this plan in 2021, leading up to its adoption, we thought really carefully with residents, property owners, and others about how the area could evolve over time to accommodate a lot of our growth. And some of it may not be evolving for another 10, 20 years down the road. One of the really important mechanisms for accommodating change is to lay out a street network that will work as this area continues to evolve, accommodate more of our more of our development and growth, which has already begun, we want to be sure that there's predictability for all property owners as far as where future streets will go. And so when we were working through the planning process, we worked very carefully with the TPPB and Plan Commission, and ultimately the council adopted this map, which shows the future proposed street network. And it distinguishes between the streets that we intended as a city to officially map, which is what's before the council this evening. Those are shown here in the darker blue. And the suggested streets that, we wouldn't go so far as to officially map the suggested streets, but it shows basically how the urban grid would connect over time. And those are shown in the lighter blue. Now, as you'll notice, in this particular area surrounding the existing mall building, the areas that are before the council for official mapping actually stop before they get to the building itself. And so we're not, through your action this evening, the city would not be officially mapping any future rights of way through the mall building itself, but stopping just short of that. And again, one of the main reasons is really predictability. As this area evolves, as properties change hands, and significant development and redevelopment occur, we need to have that certainty with regard to where that urban street grid is going to be located. And so that's really the key in the action that's before you tonight for a decision.
And how does the, can you put the slide back up?
Sure, sorry.
How does the proposed, I think it said, planned street connection affect any growth that the Westtown area's owners are planning, like their outlots, for example?
Sure, that's a great question. So basically, what these mapped future streets would do would be to assist a variety of property owners, including the owners of the mall, in placing future buildings. And this also happens to be in an area where a rezoning that was already approved as part of the consent agenda would really allow for up to 8-story buildings by right in this area. And so the future street network helps to lay out basically the bones for where that redevelopment and development can occur, including within the outlots. And so you see some of these small blocks created by the dark blue officially mapped streets. If you think of those as blocks similar to what we've seen along East Washington Avenue, close to the downtown, they can really accommodate that level of intensity as far as redevelopment and development is concerned. And a lot of that's on existing parking lots today. So again, it's laying out that gridded street network, which will be the future, not only transportation, but also the location of other urban services to really serve a quite intensive level of redevelopment opportunity.
And the planned street connection is really the suggested? That's in the light blue?
The light blue is less absolute than the darker blue. So tonight, the council is really focused on officially mapping future rights of way for the city within those darker blue areas shown in this plan that was adopted in September 2021. Everything before you this evening is consistent with the adopted plan from September 2021. The lighter blue streets simply show graphically how that grid could fit together in the future if and when the mall building itself were to be redeveloped.
And then is that also the same for the back buildings, Office Depot, Nordstrom's Rack, where you have the light blue going through those areas?
Yes, correct.
Okay. And then I saw in the staff comments something about connection with the, I believe it was the, the Zor? Let me just go to my notes. Their building is already demolished. It was,
The Zor Shrine Alder?
Yes. Oh, thank you, Mayor. You have saved me on many occasions. Yes.
Yes, so the Zor Shrine site is under redevelopment right now, and they have maintained space for the future street network as shown in this plan.
And where's their future street network? Is that the gray area? Or he's not on here? It was in the staff notes.
Sure. I actually can't point to it right now. I believe it's one of the lighter blue streets, but it was a critical connection east-west through that portion of their site. And they agreed to maintain space for that for the future when that was approved many months back.
And all of that is connected to the Odana plan?
Correct.
Area plan?
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you, Alder. Are there any other questions for staff on item 21? Seeing none, it's been moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Seeing no discussion, is there any objection to recording a unanimous vote in favor? Seeing no objection, we'll record a unanimous vote in favor of item 21. And that will take us to item 66. Item 66 is Legistar 75280, a substitute creating sections of the Madison General Ordinances to establish a building energy savings code and to update the bond schedule accordingly. President Furman? Moved and seconded to adopt the substitute. Are there questions for staff on item 65? Oh, we do have a presentation, sorry. Will you press your little button for me, please? There you are.
Are we ready?
Yes.
Awesome. I believe there are some slides to share that are coming up. So hello, everyone. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Jessica Price, and I'm the Sustainability and Resilience Manager for the city. Okay, I'll get a little closer. Okay, great. Just waiting on our slides. Fingers crossed. Perfect. Okay, you can go ahead and go to the next slide. Thank you. So this program is really aimed at putting our climate goals into action, which is more important now than ever. We're already feeling the impacts of climate change here in Madison, especially increased heat and rainfall. The most recent decades were Madison's warmest and wettest on record, and that's putting our health, our infrastructure, and our economy at risk. This warming trend is bringing increases in the frequency of extreme storms and heavy rains, leading to flooding and high winds that put our communities in danger. And by the end of the century, these storms will probably be nearly twice as frequent as they are today throughout Wisconsin. The City of Madison is committed to doing our part to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and avoid the worst impacts of climate change. Next slide. Madison is committed to reaching 100% renewable energy and net zero carbon emissions for city operations by 2030 and community-wide by 2050. We know that the two biggest sources of greenhouse gas emissions in our community come from transportation and buildings, with buildings counting for 30% of our emissions. Therefore, it's a key strategy for reducing our emissions in the commercial building sector, and that's improving energy efficiency. Greater efficiency means less wasted energy, fewer greenhouse gas emissions, and lower utility bills. Most of Madison's commercial buildings are about 70% of them are 10,000 square feet or less. And those buildings combined use less than 20% of the commercial building energy use. It's about 6.5% of Madison's commercial buildings, those over 50,000 square feet, that are responsible for 48% of our commercial building energy use. And so by focusing on these larger buildings, which are the larger consumers of energy, we hope to maximize near-term energy and emissions reductions. Next slide. Nearly 50 cities, counties, and states have adopted energy efficiency policies for existing buildings, including our neighbors in Minnesota, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, and Michigan. These policies include benchmarking, building performance standards, retro-commissioning, building tune-ups, energy audits, energy disclosure, and upgrades to specific equipment. So why is a policy needed? When we take a look at a wide swath of programs aimed at improving building efficiency, even the best voluntary programs rarely result in energy efficiency improvements in more than 1% to 2% of the buildings in a city per year. To deliver on our climate promise, we need much faster and more widespread action on building energy efficiency. We need everyone, not just the early adopters, to do their part. And it's important to act now. Building owners and operators are making important maintenance decisions that affect building energy use for the next 10 to 20 years. Next slide. To develop a program for Madison, we've spent more than 2 years researching existing building energy efficiency policies across the U.S., engaging with folks in the Madison community and our peer cities. We've spoken with more than 80 individuals from over 35 organizations, including building energy professionals and scientists, building owners and managers, facilities management professionals, real estate professionals, the business community, MG&E and Alliant, Focus on Energy, public institutions, nonprofit organizations, and peer cities. It's kind of a long list. We've held public information meetings and workshops to gather input on specific aspects of the program's design. We've also conducted a racial equity and social justice analysis of the program that was completed by a 9-member panel consisting of 3 city staff members and 6 community members. Next slide, please. Oh, thank you. So with all of this research in mind, we designed the proposed Building Energy Savings Program. The program pairs annual energy benchmarking and with periodic building tune-ups, which are proven low-cost and high-benefit actions to save energy, save money, and cut emissions. Under the proposed program, commercial buildings 25,000 square feet and larger would measure and report building energy use to the city once a year. And commercial buildings 50,000 square feet and larger would also perform tune-ups and report to the city every 4 years. Tune-ups are simply checking and adjusting a building's existing systems like lighting and HVAC to make sure they're operating at their best. Importantly, this ordinance would not apply to any buildings that are less than 25,000 square feet, any residential buildings or residential portions of buildings, or buildings that are used for industrial or manufacturing purposes. Next slide. So why this approach? Both benchmarking and tune-ups are proven strategies with big benefits and small costs. Data from existing programs shows that benchmarking and tune-ups reduce energy waste by 8 to 12% on average. Saving energy saves money and cuts climate pollution. In Chicago, for example, which someone spoke to earlier, the energy use intensity, that's the amount of energy used per square foot, of buildings used in their benchmarking program dropped by 9% in just 3 years, and greenhouse gas emissions intensity dropped 25%. And energy savings of 10 to 15% in large commercial buildings in Madison, those that would be covered by this program, would cut our climate pollution by more than 91,000 tons of carbon a year. That's the equivalent of taking 18,000 cars off of our roads. Benchmarking and tune-ups have a very low upfront cost and a fast payback. Benchmarking only takes a couple of hours a year and can be completed by anyone, so there's no need to hire a contractor. And tune-ups can also be completed by trained building staff and are low cost if they choose to use a contractor. And making sure existing systems are operating as expected results in a fast return on investment. Simple operating adjustments and routine maintenance saves energy and money. That's an average of 12% energy savings, and tune-ups pay for themselves in less than 2 years. And finally, the program provides flexibility for building owners to choose. They get to choose their paths that are best for their building. Benchmarking provides valuable information for energy management and planning. And tune-up provisions enable owners of buildings 50,000 square feet and larger to tune up or take a comparable pathway to energy efficiency. And I'll explain more about that later. And finally, the information provided by benchmarking and tune-ups enables building owners and the city to make data-driven choices and program design. So the rest of the slideshow and really most of the ordinance is just the details about how we can do this. And so we had to answer questions like, how do we give people enough lead time to comply? How do we get specific about what a tune-up is so that it'll definitely be on the same page? And how do we know what those alternative compliance pathways are comparable? So those are just some of the things that I'm going to go over over the next few slides. So to restate, the program would require buildings 25,000 square feet and larger to benchmark energy use once a year and submit a one-page summary report to the city. Energy benchmarking is simply measuring and tracking annual energy use, and it enables building owners and operators to understand energy use patterns, spot unexpected changes in energy use, set energy goals and track their progress, and identify additional opportunities to save energy and money. Many existing programs around the country show the difference benchmarking can make. On average, buildings that consistently benchmark cut energy waste by 2.4% a year, and these savings accrue year over year to add up to 8 to 10% savings overall. In Minneapolis, their benchmarking program has reduced energy use by 8%, and it's reduced their energy use intensity, which is the energy use per square foot, by 5.5%. In Chicago, we see covered buildings dropping their energy use by 9%, and greenhouse gas emissions intensity reduced by 25%. And in St. Louis, the energy use intensity of covered buildings decreased by 12%. Next slide. Buildings would be benchmarked using Energy Star Portfolio Manager, which is a free online tool developed and supported by the US EPA. The process of benchmarking is quick and easy to complete. The initial setup takes about 4 hours and 2 hours each subsequent year. Anyone can complete benchmarking. There's no special training needed, so the only cost is a few hours of staff time. And only the one-page statement of energy performance that's generated by Portfolio Manager is shared with the city. And to be really clear, there are no fees for submitting this statement of energy performance to the city. Next slide. And once every 4 years, commercial buildings 50,000 square feet and larger would be required to tune up or choose an alternative compliance pathway that demonstrates they're on a path to energy efficiency. A building tune-up is a process of checking and adjusting a building's existing systems that impact energy use to make sure they're operating as expected and aren't accidentally wasting energy. If needed, operational adjustments, maintenance, or minor repairs are made so the systems are in a good state of operation. Tune-ups can be performed by current building staff or a contracted service provider who has experience with building energy systems and holds one of several applicable qualifications. Next slide. So what building systems are included in a tune-up? As I said, tune-ups focus on making sure existing systems are working as intended. So that means checking the settings and sensors and controls and the physical condition of 5 major building systems. These are the systems that use most of the energy in a building. So that includes the building envelope, HVAC systems, conveying systems. That includes like elevators and escalators and moving walkways, domestic hot water systems, and electrical lighting systems. Importantly, tune-ups do not require anyone to install new systems or replace any functional equipment. So for example, a building would not need to switch to LED lighting or replace their boiler. The focus is on making those existing systems run well. Next slide. Tune-ups are common sense system checks that provide quick paybacks. They save money on utility bills, and so rather than simply landing as a cost, tune-ups are an investment in a building that provides a really fast return. A 2020 meta-analysis of tune-up programs around the country by Pacific Northwest National Labs found that tune-ups provide a median annual energy savings of 12%, with some building savings as much as 52%. And they had an annual median cost savings of 16 cents per square foot. This energy cost savings meant that the tune-ups had a simple payback of 1.7 years on average. This means that tune-ups pay for themselves in less than 2 years, and a 4-year tune-up cycle enables tune-ups to be revenue neutral or revenue positive. Next slide. And as I mentioned, owners of buildings 50,000 square feet or larger have a few options or pathways for meeting the tune-up requirement. We recognize that some building owners and managers are already investing in energy efficiency for their buildings. To allow flexibility, building owners can choose to conduct a tune-up, or they can demonstrate they have a highly efficient building or have recently taken actions that substantially improve their building's efficiency through alternative compliance pathways. So there are really 3 options for buildings that are required to tune up. First, they could choose to complete a tune-up, as I just described. Second, they could demonstrate that their building is already very energy efficient or that they've recently taken actions, and submitting proof of one of 11 conditions or certifications. Those are the alternative compliance pathways. There's also flexibility in the ordinance to add additional pathways as needed. Or third, they could apply for a deadline extension or exemption, which would give them more time to complete a tune-up or an alternative pathway, or to let us know if there are any extenuating circumstances. Next slide. Benchmarking and tune-ups wouldn't start right away. They would be phased in over several years to give everyone time to plan and prepare. This also gives the city time to conduct more outreach and make adjustments as we go along. Benchmarking would be phased in over 3 years. The largest buildings would start benchmarking first in 2024, followed by medium buildings in 2025, and the smallest set of buildings in 2026. Next slide. Tune-ups wouldn't begin until 2025. The largest buildings would tune up for the first time in 2025, and medium buildings would first tune up in 2026. Buildings that are those smallest set of buildings wouldn't need to tune up. And so we've staggered these beginning dates so that no building would have to start a new action, more than one new action in a given year. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we've zoomed in really far in the program details, and I'd like to end by looking at the big picture. The Building Energy Savings Program brings significant benefits for our community. First, the program turns our climate commitments to significantly reduce greenhouse gas emissions across all sources into action by utilizing proven cost-effective strategies. The program will cut community-wide climate pollution by 91,000 to 167,000 tons per year. That's as much as taking 18,000 to 27,000 cars off the road. Reducing fossil fuel energy generation also improves air quality and protects public health. This program will help businesses save money on their utility bills and improve their bottom line. And finally, it makes our community more competitive. It demonstrates we're as serious on climate action as the nearly 50 other cities and states doing work to reduce building emissions, which is who we compete with for federal and philanthropic dollars. So with that is it, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there questions for staff now? Seeing none. Oh, Alder Evers.
Thank you, Mayor. Jessica, could you speak to this issue that some have brought up, that the tune-up, the specifications of the tune-up have not been finalized? Is that unusual when we adopt something along these lines that that have a delayed implementation? It seems to me to be pretty standard operating procedure. Is that correct?
Yes, it's really common for council to pass legislation to create a program, and then for staff to go and create that program, which includes program guidance and additional details. And so this has been, the ordinance itself includes language in the intent section to that effect, that we want to continue to collaborate to develop those detailed elements of the program. And it's also important to note that those more detailed elements of the program are often not captured in an ordinance itself, because those details need to be responsive as new technologies come up, as new building tune-up certifications come up, or new awards and recognitions come up for recognizing energy efficient buildings. So that program guidance is something that often gets developed as a program, after a program is adopted and during that implementation phase.
So we're, in a sense, if I may follow up, we're inviting stakeholders to participate in that process with us. It's my impression that several of the stakeholders in our community have actually appreciated that and are looking forward to engaging with staff in that process. Is that correct?
That's correct. We had a really productive conversation with several folks in our community. For example, we talked with folks representing several of the hospitals in our community about continuing that collaboration to make sure that we lead a process where we have a lot of folks around the table to develop those elements.
Thank you. Thanks. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Alder. Are there any other questions for staff? Alder Tischler?
Yeah, just by evidence, the fact that many of us are attending this meeting remote, the pandemic has changed our many employees' relationship with work. And I guess I'm wondering how this benchmarking and tune-ups take into account the increased number of employees that are working remote, and how does that factor into this?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So for benchmarking in particular, the tool, Energy Star Portfolio Manager, developed by EPA, is a very robust tool. So we reached out to them and had a lot of conversations about the ways that their tool can accommodate many different situations that we see out in the real world. And so throughout the course of the pandemic, and continuing today, they're constantly updating that tool so that it's very robust to handle many different situations. And so the tool itself is perfectly capable of successfully and accurately benchmarking buildings across all levels of occupancy. And so that's typically not a problem for being able to do that. I will point out that there is an exemption in the ordinance for buildings with high levels of vacancy. So if a building has a lot of space that is currently unoccupied, unused, and unleased, then that building would qualify for an exemption from these, as that is typically an indicator of financial distress, and one of the list of many indicators. If a building is in financial distress, they can get an exemption from these, as long as they let us know.
All right, thank you, Alder Wahilihi.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you. So my question is, two questions I have. One is, why industrial and manufacturing larger buildings are exempted? And then I'll ask my second question.
Thank you for that question. And the tune-up process in particular is really designed at looking at the energy systems that are built into a building. And so those 5 systems, like lighting, HVAC, building envelope, domestic hot water, those are the primary energy using systems in commercial buildings. And industrial and manufacturing, energy use tends to be driven by those industrial processes. So that can be plug load, it can be heavy equipment. And so energy efficiency work in those kinds of buildings would simply need a different approach. And so it's really not a good fit for that tune-up. That's not how you're going to get the energy savings on a manufacturing and an industrial process, because that's mostly about those processes and not about the building operations.
Thank you. And my other question is, in terms of reducing energy bill, can you give us a breakdown for smaller buildings like 25,000 and 50,000 in comparison, what that looks like in terms of the data you collected from cities that are kind of using the benchmarking and tune-up?
So if you could clarify the question, you're interested in the energy savings that they get from?
Yes, if you were to talk about in terms of dollars, like when you say this tune-up and benchmarking will reduce energy bill,
Mm-hmm.
do you have specific data that we can fall into that this is really working and it will help the businesses?
Sure. So the average, and I could, if given a little while, I could dig up the research on this. I have the averages in front of me. And so across building sizes, the average energy savings for a tune-up is, it's 16 cents per square foot. And so that scales across different building types. And that is based on an average level of energy savings. And so some buildings that see a greater energy savings will see greater reductions in energy use. So that does tend to scale, and it holds true across buildings of different sizes.
Thank you.
Oh, and those are things that happen continuously. So when you reduce your energy savings by 16% per square foot, that is something that sticks with you. So you will continue to accrue those savings year after year.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Alder Carter.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I think you've mentioned in your presentation that this will be updated and tweaked along the way as this program develops and matures. How will that information be disseminated?
Yeah, thank you. So we really want to make sure that we're adaptively managing the program. So part of our program, we've been calling it kind of program launch. And so the time between the beginning of the program, adoption of a program, to when those first benchmarking and then tune-ups would begin, that is giving us enough time to do a lot of outreach and education, to provide education materials, to provide trainings, to have meeting people where they are across a lot of different communication methods. We intend to work with a service provider who has experience launching these programs so that we can get everybody the information they need from the start. And then that adaptive management means continuing to use those channels of communication if those adjustments are needed. And those are the kinds of adjustments to say, okay, hey, we have a building. In our first round, there may have been a bit of confusion. We did the homework and we did the legwork to make sure to clear up that confusion, and then we're able to update those materials before we send them out again. That's just sort of one simple example.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. I have no other alders in the queue. Alder Tischler, more questions.
Sorry, I seem to ask a lot of questions when I'm remote. This basically puts the benchmarking on the owners of buildings, and what about those who businesses that lease in spaces? How's that relationship between the two on regards to benchmarking and tune-ups?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the way the way the language is laid out is it is the responsibility of the building owner to make sure that information, that one-page summary is reported. There are a lot of different approaches to making sure you're getting that whole building data, and they can work closely with their tenants to get that data. We expect from our conversations with other cities who have established benchmarking programs, that tends to work pretty smoothly, but we know that sometimes there can be hiccups. And so if anyone has any hiccups, for example, a tenant simply doesn't want to participate in this program or isn't available or they're running late or for whatever reason, as long as the building owner has made a good faith effort to submit their whole building energy use data, that is okay. So we're not kind of trying to create that strained relationship.
Thank you, Alder. Are there any other questions for staff? Seeing none. The substitute has been moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Seeing, Alder Paulson.
Yeah, I'd like to be added as a sponsor.
Clerk will add Alder Paulson as a sponsor. Thank you, Alder. Is there further discussion? Alder Vetter would like to be added as a sponsor. No other alders in the queue for discussion. So on item 66, the substitute has been moved and seconded. Is there objection to recording unanimous vote in favor? Seeing no objection, we'll record a unanimous vote in favor of item 66. And move on to item 67. Item 67 is Legistar 75053, a substitute establishing a grant program to support accessible taxi cabs in Madison. On item 67, President Furman.
Move adoption of substitute with the following additional language after the be it further resolved, which adds, as well as incorporating other aspects of the city's commitment to racial and social justice equity.
That moved and seconded of the substitute with additional language. That additional language is, I believe, in everyone's email, and the clerk has it, hopefully. All right, so on item 67, are there questions for staff? Seeing none. On item 67, is there discussion? Alder Furman.
Thank you, Mayor. I had a lot of questions for staff yesterday, so I'm not going to make staff answer the questions again today, but I'll talk a little about my concerns and why I won't be supporting this evening. I appreciate the intent of what this is trying to do. I'm very appreciative that Alder Paulson and Alder Miazzi have worked on this and have seen the articles about the issues with accessible taxi cabs in Madison. The problem I have is that there is no guarantee that these cabs are actually going to be used for helping people that need accessible cabs. This is essentially giving cars to these companies, or a grant to these companies to buy these accessible cars, and just crossing our fingers and hoping that they'll actually use them for accessible rides. Alder Paulson shared on his blog, as well as to Alder's, the same FAQ with some background, et cetera. And it's clear that there are other cities that have faced this issue with how to deal with accessible cabs and implemented surcharges. The city has looked at surcharges in the past. I think that's a much better way. I think that helping spread the cost among all taxi users, and also requiring that the cab companies have accessible vehicles, is a much better way than giving them a grant and just kind of crossing our fingers and hoping it's going to be used. Additionally, there's a provision that was added to this by the Disability Rights Commission, and I understand why they added it, which is that the taxi cab drivers cannot charge for loading and unloading. And I appreciate the desire and the intent of making sure that we're not punishing people with disabilities by giving them additional charges, additional costs. But I think there's also a better way to deal with that through an implementation of a surcharge. So I do think a minimal surcharge could be implemented that could help compensate the taxi drivers for that additional time, because they should be paid for their time, and then also to be providing cabs. So I just don't think this is the right way to solve this problem, so I won't be supporting this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Harrington McKinney, discussion?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I not only will be supporting this, I'd like to be added as a sponsor, because in the my business that I am involved in, we have a lot of seniors who would like to navigate through the city, even going to shopping, going to church, or those things, but they cannot get a taxi that will is suited for them if they're in a wheelchair lift or any of that. And so one of the items that's before us is a legislation where we're looking at equity for older adults. And if we as a city has not made older adults a priority, and we really do need to be making older adults a priority, we also need to be looking at those who are differently abled. And this absolutely addresses those who are differently abled and to assist them to navigate around the city. And that's critically important. I think that should be one of the values that we stand for. And I absolutely am going to support this. And I hope that my colleagues support it as well, because it's sorely needed as we're looking at BRT and making sure that individuals can get where they need to get. We also need to not leave out a segment of our population that needs services as well. Please add me as a sponsor.
Thank you, Alder. The clerk will add you as a sponsor. Alder Evers?
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, I agree with President Furman that everyone here in this body supports the basis for the work that Alder Paulson did. I think though the question is this the right way to go about it? And I share some of President Furman's concerns. This to me is a bit of a half measure, a more developed, more thoroughly constructed review of best practices nationwide would have perhaps got us further. That's not to say that the work that Alder Paulson did is not greatly appreciated. It's a step forward. I will in fact be voting for this, but I want to encourage us all, those who wish to work on this in the future, to really revisit the ordinance that we had in the early 2000s, where cab companies were required to provide this service. And we got to figure out a way to subsidize that effectively. And what other cities do is that there is a surcharge. In bigger cities, it's 10 cents. Maybe ours would need to be 25 cents or 50 cents a ride to pay for this. But to think that just providing the vehicles alone is sufficient, it's clearly not, but it is a step forward. So I will be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Foster?
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have quite as much background on this as I would have liked. This was reviewed by the Transportation Commission, not the Policy and Planning Board that I sit on. I just did want to speak to one of the concerns that were raised and one of the challenges with using a fee added on to cab trips to pay for this. And the really important thing to understand is that with the rideshare companies that started providing service, it really completely gutted out the taxi industry, and we are unable to regulate those like we are able to regulate taxis. So if we were to add a surcharge only to taxi cabs and not to rideshare services, it would just be another strike against them. So I think we are really limited largely because of our inability to regulate the rideshare companies. So just wanted to put that out there, that I think an alternate funding source is not perhaps quite as easy as other municipalities and other states might have it. Thanks.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Carter.
Yes, I'm just going to repeat what I said in the finance meeting, because I do think there needs to be a little bit more not necessary restrictions, but accountability for these cars and using them according to what this resolution is trying to establish. I will be supporting it, but I do think it needs some tweaking in the future.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Better.
Yes, I'd like to applaud my fellow Alder Paulson for working on this so diligently and so hard, and appreciate all the work that he's done on this. I would also like to be added as a co-sponsor. We do need more accessible taxi cabs in the city. There's a very low level of rides being put out these days. And when I, for example, want to get one, it's very difficult for me to get a ride even. And, you know, I've been using Union Cab for years and years, but they need more drivers, they need more vehicles, they need more money for the program. And I'm very happy that Dr. Alder Paulson's been working on it and has seen having this legislation go forward to increase the number of cabs so we can increase the number of rides, so we can increase the number of people getting out in the community to go to work, to school, to recreational things, but anything to help people to get around in the city where they would not be able to get around otherwise. Thank you very much for this legislation, this resolution.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Paulson.
Yeah, thank you to everyone who's supported this at Finance and supported it tonight. And thank you to Alder Miazzi, who's been working on this with me since this past July. This was we came out of our get to know you, have a beer back in the summer after I joined the council, and this was an area we identified to work on together. And so we've been chugging away on that, and I'm glad we're getting it done. A little late, but getting it done. So I also wanted to echo the concerns that President Furman brought up, that there is a bit of a challenge to is this going to work? And I highlighted some of that in my blog, and there is a little bit of a leap of faith here, though I think we have a lot of opportunity to design the program to record the metrics as best we can. I don't think we would ever want to say that these cabs could only be used for accessible rides. I think we want to make sure that one of the values of the capital asset is that when they're not being used for accessible rides, that they are able to still be in use. Though I suspect the demand for accessible rides is going to be high enough that they will almost always be in use for accessible rides. If you don't know, when some of these taxi cab ordinances were discussed a couple years ago, there were 4 cab companies. We're now down to 2. Green Cab bought Badger Cab, and then Green Cab went out of business, and with it, it took out Van Gogh as well, which was a major provider of accessible rides. And so now we're down fewer, and I think we all know that we're just in a rough spot in being able to in helping our friends who need a slightly different vehicle to get around to be able to fully participate in and move around. So. So just to highlight one procedural thing, we will have more opportunity to continue to work on this. We did not try to write all of the language in the resolution tonight. We gave broad guidance, and then we'll let our excellent staff and their expertise come and tackle this on, and that will go before the Transportation Commission for final approval. So we will still have some opportunity to try to work out with best practices and with the certainty of the program that staff can adequately develop time, and then the council, of course, will get a kick at the can for approving any grants when those are recommended down the road. So I think I've covered most of the rest of it in my blog post or in the committees, and so in the interest of moving along tonight, I will I'll cut off here, though. If other folks have questions, I'm happy to come back and talk about this. I just wanted to thank a lot of staff, a lot of folks in transportation, Tom Lynch, Keith Pollock in traffic engineering, who's our taxi cab coordinator. Ben Lyman in the MPO has been tremendous help. Attorney McReynolds, Rebecca Hoyt in our disability rights advocacy work, and so many others. And so thank you all to the staff who've been working on this. It's been great fun working with you all, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Bennett.
Thank you. I just wanted to commend as well Alder Paulson and Alder Miatse, and please add me as a co-sponsor.
Thank you, Alder. You'll be added as a co-sponsor. Alder Wahilihi.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Similar, I want to appreciate and commend Alder Miatse and Alder Paulson for their creativity and collaboration with the staff, and I would like to be added as a co-sponsor.
Thank you, Alder. We'll add you as a co-sponsor. I have no other alders in the queue wishing to speak. So based on the conversation, I'm going to suggest it has been, so a substitute with additional language, which is in your email, has been moved and seconded. Is there any objection to recording a unanimous vote with the notation that Alder Furman is voting no? Any objection to that? Seeing none, we'll record that vote with Alder Furman voting no and the balance of the council voting aye. And yes, that was a 15-vote item, so it does achieve the 15 votes. And we'll move on to item 85, which is Legistar 75901, making various changes to the Madison General Ordinances to recreate, I'll take some liberty there, a Transportation Commission and remove references to the Transportation Policy and Planning Board. On item 85, President Furman.
Move adoption of substitute.
Moved and seconded to adopt the substitute. Are there questions for staff? Alder Harrington McKinney.
Yes, I do have a question. In reviewing what the substitute, it's very substantive, and absolutely there was such well-grounded discussion at the combined meetings. And my question is that as it has arrived at this place, was that sent back to the chairs for them to review, or I guess that's my question.
think this might be a question for our transportation director. Can you just walk us through when the substitute arose, and is that based on the committee discussion, or was that subsequent to the committee discussion?
There was a substitute that was developed last night at the Joint Transportation Plan and Policy Board meeting and Transportation Commission. And that was, became the substitute. And then today, I believe is Ann Kovich, who is the chair of the Transportation Commission, also noted a couple of items where there were maybe gaps or misspellings in some of the ordinance. And so she suggested that they be included. Some of it includes, like, for instance, there was a reference to complete or green streets instead of complete green streets. There was a little bit of omission in regards to accessible taxis and the like. And so both the sponsors, Alder Foster and Alder Furman, felt like her suggested additions were warranted and incorporated them in the substitute. And then myself, one thing that we had always been discussing is just the need for staggered terms of the commission members. And last night, the adopted ordinance by the TPPB and the TC did not include that language that would stagger terms so that we don't have a whole new body every 3 years. You know, a couple members come off every year. And so language for staggered terms was incorporated as well. One of the chairs is aware of these, some of the corrections you might say that were discussed last night. Tom Wilson probably wasn't aware because he wasn't in the email chain.
Further questions, Alder?
Not further questions, and that was just my observation when Tom was asked. And I know that during the combined meeting, some of these were not discussed. Absolutely everyone, most of the people who were on the
Alder,
combined.
if there's no further questions, let me
Yes.
pause and see if any of your colleagues have other questions before we come into discussion. Are there other questions for staff? Alder Tischler.
Yeah, I asked a question. It looks like many of the makeup of the committee needs to be one member. Primary mode of transportation is bike. Another one is walking. Another one is automobile. But I guess the question to Tom: how are, I guess this question to staff: how are we going to measure that? If they're just going by someone's word that they're going to be biking all the time, or what is primary, I guess.
Yeah, well, one of our recommendations, the staff recommendations, is the makeup is very specific, and sometimes it's difficult to fill the seats when you have very specific makeups. I think the sponsors of the ordinance have their reasons for wanting it to be very specific, just to make sure that all modes are represented well, all different transportation challenges are represented well, and so there was, I'm going to say, a considerable discussion about that at the joint TC and TPPB meeting. But as far as we just take people's word for it, we don't enforce as their primary mode transit. I think the important thing is, are they a transit user? Do they understand the system? Do they understand the challenges of the system? Whether or not they're, like, for instance, bike rider, is their primary mode bike rider? We're not going to enforce that, but do they use bicycling as a form of transportation and understand some of the challenges that exist in the city for bicyclists? And so that's, I think, what we're interested in regarding that.
Further questions, Alder? If not, Alder Wahilahi, questions?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just curious as when will this ordinance will be effective and what will happen to the both chairs?
Well, I think the date was added in the substitute. The effective date is upon appointment of the members to the Transportation Commission, at which point the Transportation Planning and Policy Board and Commission, as originally comprised by a certain ordinance, shall be eliminated. And so we anticipate that this joint committee will be made up of members of both the TPPB and the TC. It will be the mayor's responsibility to appoint those members. I suspect that they will be appointed with the first meeting in April, but I'm not fully confident of that. The mayor may choose to do it earlier or later.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. If no other alders in the queue with questions. So it's been moved and seconded to adopt the substitute. Is there discussion? Alder Paulson.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to amend the item, and you've got it in your inbox. And it would change the makeup of the board from 7 resident members to 6 resident members and 1 regional representative, and then include some additional text for dealing with the regional representative. And I will speak to it.
Is there a second? Moved and seconded. Alder Paulson?
Yeah, though I think maybe Alder Bennett has a question. I sent it before the meeting at 6:14 p.m. It's amendment to number 75901 TPPB/TC ordinance, and I misspelled ordinance. That's probably why you can't find it.
Alder Paulson, do you want to speak to the amendment?
Yes. So this was the language that was originally in the proposal, but then as the discussion with the joint meeting, the TC and TPPB last night, they chose to go for more member representatives or more resident members of the committee, and to get there, they eliminated the regional representative. So this is maybe a little bit of an odd component, and it comes from the TPPB, where in the TPPB we actually include a non-resident member of the board, someone from one of the other regional transit or one of the municipalities nearby that has metro service. Right now, Alderman Randy Udell from Fitchburg is a member of the TPPB and participates in those policy discussions. And so when the commission was originally, when the combined commission was being designed, it brought that along, but the thought was to eliminate that. And I actually think that was a mistake. I think that a very strong, a very, very positive aspect and something that the city should be proud of is that we did have a representative from one of our neighbors to be part of that board, because the transit system is a regional asset. It is a regional decision. The decisions that we make affect our neighbors, and the decisions our neighbors make affect that. And I thought it was incredibly useful to have them have a representative from somewhere outside of the Madison city boundaries to be a part of that board. And it just says a tremendous amount about how much we value the regional cooperation. And I thought having that seat there, let that speak. Now, there's obviously downsides to that, right? We're giving someone who's not a Madison resident the opportunity to vote on Madison policies. And there is the reality of the new board. This board is taking the TPPB recommendations and combining them with the TC recommendations. And TC gets down and dirty and talks about curb cuts and then, the middle of the Eakin Park neighborhood, which Fitchburg does not really care about, and they might go hours to talk about sidewalks and in former town of Madison properties, and Monona doesn't care about that. So we are asking a lot of this member to do that. I will say that I was roundly defeated last night when I tried to make this, and I do appreciate that, and I want to just disclose that the boards felt strongly that it should be a resident member, but I'm asking the council to look at this from the city's perspective and the city government perspective and our relationship with our neighboring municipalities and say, well, we do value that as well. And while I appreciate that the boards think that resident members are maybe more important, I hope that I'm asking us tonight to say that the regional membership is also something, and as a city policy makers, we should continue that as a sign for fostering cooperation and as a little bit of an information exchange. Let's have someone from Monona on it, and let's have them have a sidewalk discussion, because Lord knows Monona needs more sidewalks. And let's have them take that expertise back and say, we should have these too. So I hope you'll support this. If not, I fully support the underlying motion, and I'll talk a little bit about that maybe later, but I hope you support this. I think this will be better maintaining that regional representative. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So on the amendment, Alder Harrington McKinney, or on the main motion? All right. I'll come back to you then. On the amendment, Alder Foster?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes. I appreciate my colleague bringing this here. I will be, I'll support the recommendation from the Transportation Policy and Planning Board and Transportation Commission, which, as he mentioned, was everyone voted to not bring a regional representative into this new body. This was an important component of the current Transportation Policy Planning Board when it was imagined 5 years ago. And we've had a lot of experience with that role on that body. In my opinion, the role of that regional rep is really only relevant on a relatively small amount of what we discussed at the Transportation Policy and Planning Board today, specifically around Metro. This was the real reason we ever included a regional rep in that body. And back then, 5 years ago, we were still imagining a day where we might have BRT. And we really felt like bringing in a neighboring partner would be instrumental in trying to find some momentum to make that happen. Obviously, we're sitting here in a much different situation. I think we've made a lot of headway there. And I think what we've seen is that regional position, in my opinion, didn't really, was not key in the work that we did around BRT or the Metro redesign. And instead, it was really the engagement that our staff did with all of the neighboring communities, including negotiating and renegotiating contracts with each different neighboring community, which have their own interests and concerns. And I think the best way to get that input is the way that we did go about it. And I don't think that any one regional rep should really be expected to represent the interests of all the different regional partners in the transit system. So my biggest objection at this point is that I think it would be a real burden to even ask and to put on someone who might think it sounds great and volunteer, and they would be sitting through many hours of very long TC meetings with probably 90% plus of the discussion really not pertaining in any way to their community or to the region. So I don't think it's valuable. And I think part of why there was such strong support to replace that position with a resident position is that one of the outcomes of this merger is that there will be an overall fewer number of opportunities for residents to serve. And it was felt that the additional diversity of an additional resident appointment outweighed whatever a regional rep would bring to it. So I support the original recommendation. I'll be voting against this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Furman is next.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll try to be brief. I am a sponsor of the original and the substitute. The original did include the regional representative, and I thought the discussion last night of Transportation Commission and the Transportation Policy Planning Board was incredibly helpful to really talk about some possibly different options, including making that person a non-voting member, the desire for more residents, et cetera. And as Alder Foster pointed out, Alder Paulson was alone in his desire to keep that regional member there last night. I will note that we did talk about there are opportunities for communities to engage, community representatives to engage with Metro on issues. They do have work groups and committees, or work groups / committees, whatever you want to call it. So, we're not shutting our partners out of discussions. But I think more likely what will end up happening is with this position is you won't even see the representatives show up. The Plan Commission is an example of they have a MMSD board seat on the Plan Commission, and MMSD doesn't send anybody. They don't have anybody appointed, and they don't send the superintendent, who could go. So I think there's, I don't think this is a good idea for this combined committee, and so I also will not be supporting this amendment. Thanks.
Thank you, Alder Bennett.
Madam Mayor, is it okay if I ask a question
Of
staff? If it's too late, that's fine.
we
was just
moved past questions, but I didn't allow an opportunity for questions on the amendment, so I'll allow it.
Thank you. I was just wondering, for this role, would a staff member be able to kind of bridge that gap for what is needed in the regional, or would they be able to provide expertise?
Yes. We will be interacting at the staff level with Fitchburg and their representatives, particularly with the North-South Bus Rapid Transit, which is a regional transportation thing that this committee will be reviewing. And I think the discussion last night also stated that we could invite some of their representatives into these discussions when we talk about regional issues. I think some of the feelings of the commission and the board are these meetings can get quite long and maybe a little tedious. And is that fair? For someone from a different community. But we will be interacting on staff, and we could pilot or try something of inviting an elected representative from adjacent communities when talking about issues that relate to them.
Okay, cool. And I'm wondering, does Fitchburg, I don't know if they have something similar to this in terms of their transportation, but do they have a Madison resident representative or regional representative?
I don't know if they have one on their board. We have had, Randy Udell, older person, on our board, and I felt like it's provided some value. And currently he's he'll
Can
either
you
be
speak to that? What value would be lost?
I think when we, if you think about the Transportation Planning and Policy Board, they are looking at issues at a higher level. And so when we talk about the location of the bus rapid transit, where does it go? And prior to Randy Udell joining us, we had a representative from Middleton. And so that was very useful as we're planning bus rapid transit as it goes to the west, right? And then, so on the higher level, I feel like it's been of value. Then when we talk about maybe more policy-oriented items, like for instance, the complete green streets, okay? That's not directly applicable to, let's say, Fitchburg, but it's something that they might want to consider as they develop their policies. And so there might have been kind of a two-way going on. I think some of the discussion, that talked about last night is sometimes the Transportation Commission will go into details like, should this island be this long? Should we have 3 parking spaces on Old Middleton Road or 5 parking spaces on Middleton Road? And it can get into the details a lot. And so, so a regional representative on this joint board would get to enjoy some of the regional transportation issues that would be developed, but also would have to endure some of the very specific local transportation issues that may or may not be as interesting to them. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Alder Heck.
Thank you, Mayor. I heard some, I think, reasonable explanations for the actions of TC and TPPB last night, and I won't be supporting this concept of a regional rep, but I did want to remind folks that there are connections between these communities related to transportation in the form of the Greater Madison Metropolitan Planning Organization. They don't necessarily deal with the same items as our transportation entities, but there are firm connections between the cities and villages that surround us. And I think that that provides at least avenues of communication about some of these things. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. I have no other alders in the queue wishing to speak on the amendment. So on the amendment, which is to revert to the inclusion of a regional representative, I'm going to just go ahead and do a roll call. All those in favor, aye. Those opposed, no. As your name is called, and the clerk will please call the roll.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On the amendment, Alder Vidver.
No.
Alder Vidver, no. Alder Hellier.
Aye.
Alder Hellier, aye. Alder Bennett. Alder Bennett, no. Alder Carter.
No.
Alder Carter, no. Alder Conklin.
No.
Alder Conklin, no. Alder Curry. Alder Curry, no. Alder Evers.
No.
Alder Evers, no. Alder Figueroa Cole.
No.
Alder Figueroa Cole, no. Alder Foster.
No.
Alder Foster, no. Alder Furman.
No.
Alder Furman, no. Alder Harrington McKinney. Alder Harrington McKinney, no. Alder Heck. No. Alder Heck, no. Alder Madison.
No.
Alder Madison, no. Alder Miadze.
No.
Alder Miadze, no. Alder Paulson.
Aye.
Alder Paulson, aye. Alder Tischler.
No.
Alder Tischler, no. Alder Vetter. Alder Vetter, no. Alder Verveer. Alder Verveer, no. We have 2 ayes, 16 noes.
With only 2 ayes, the amendment fails. We're back to the main motion, which is to adopt the substitute. On that, Alder Harrington McKinney.
First of all, I'd like to commend the sponsors for their very detailed revisions and additions contained in the motion that's before us. It was a very robust discussion at the combined meetings, and I recognize that there is such expertise that sits on those combined boards. I would have liked for, after the sponsors completed that work, that this had a last see-through by the chairs of those boards, and it did not. I would have liked to have them to review the what's before us tonight, but that did not happen. That's exactly why we have the functions of the BC, the boards, committees, and commissions. And so I will not be supporting the amendment that's before us.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Tischler?
Yeah, I'd like to, since we can't enforce people's mode of transportation, I'd like to strike actually, I'll just send it in an email. But I guess motion to strike, and I'll just send this off right now.
So Alder Tischler.
So it's a motion to strike the ridership by bike, by walking, and by transit.
So a motion to remove the restrictions on the various appointees.
Correct. Since we can't. There's no way to monitor and enforce that.
All right. So Alder, again, we do need the exact language that you're proposing.
I just sent in an email. So
okay. So is there a second on Alder Tischler's motion? Alder Harrington McKinney will second for the purposes of discussion. And does the clerk have the language as well?
The clerk does. Would Would you like me to read it?
Would
so the
you?
public
Thank
can
you.
get it?
Yes.
Yeah, the motion is the amendment is to strike the language, one member whose primary mode of transportation in the city is the bicycle, one member whose primary transportation in the city is walking, one member whose primary mode of transportation is transit.
All right, so on Alder Tischler's proposed amendment, Alder Foster.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I'd like to just argue against this in the strongest possible way. These requirements are the existing requirements that we have in representation on these bodies. There was a ton of energy that went into developing them during the Transportation Ordinance Rewrite Committee, and I feel like they've served us incredibly well. That represents our adopted transportation policy goals to be multimodal, and I think that representation has been key being able to evaluate the projects that have come before them, as well as in developing the Complete and Green Streets and Vision Zero programs. So I truly do not understand that concept that because we cannot or are not enforcing in some way, that because someone could lie and misrepresent themselves and we somehow aren't going to make them prove it, that we should strike these requirements. I think they're absolutely at the base and the foundation, along with participation from someone that's well versed with for persons with disabilities and persons that are familiar with issues of equity and transportation. These are all really critical roles, and I would encourage all my colleagues to vote against this amendment.
Thank you, Alder Figueroa Cole.
Thank you, Mayor. I mean, I'm gonna have to echo most of what Alder Foster just mentioned. We are working so hard with programs like Safe Street and Vision Zero, where we are centering on people that, on all these type of transportation, such as walking, biking, and transit. So these are the priorities of the city. I think it is important that the more representation we have on these areas, the better. So I would not be supporting this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Carter?
Thank you. I believe that Tom Lynch said that it is sometimes difficult to find residents who meet the three requirements that are on here. I think it's interesting that transportation, where we have bicycle, walking, public transit, but we don't have someone who is use a vehicle as their primary mode of transportation, which again, we are looking at an equity issue if we're going to look at this clearly. I think that what we need on this committee is someone who understands the various modes of transportation and uses one of the various modes of transportation as a requirement. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Heck?
Thank you, Mayor. To me, this just comes down to making perfect the enemy of the good, so I won't be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Furman.
I wanted to echo that I won't be supporting this, and that we currently have no vacancies on the Transportation Policy Planning Board where we have these requirements now. I mean, I don't think we're struggling to find people. I also am just kind of shocked that we think that people who drive cars are not going to be represented on this board. They will be very represented. We know based on how many people use cars, et cetera, and how many people will be on this committee, there'll be plenty of people that have a lot of experience driving cars. Thanks.
Thank you, Alder. No other alders in the queue on the amendment. So amendment has been moved and seconded to strike certain restrictions on appointments. Anticipating disagreement, we'll have a roll call. All those in favor of the amendment, aye. Those opposed, no, as your name is called, and the clerk will please call the roll.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Alder Vidver.
No.
Alder Vidver, no. Alder Hellier.
No.
Alder Hellier, no. Alder Bennett. No. Alder Bennett, no. Alder Carter.
Aye.
Alder Carter, aye. Alder Conklin. No. Alder Conklin, no. Alder Curry. Alder Curry, no. Alder Evers.
No.
Alder Evers, no. Alder Figueroa Cole. No. Alder Figueroa Cole, no. Alder Foster.
No.
Alder Foster, no. Alder Furman. No. Alder Furman, no. Alder Harrington McKinney. No. Alder Harrington McKinney, no. Alder Heck. Alder Heck, no. Alder Madison. No. Alder Madison, no. Alder Miadze.
No.
Alder Miadze, no. Alder Paulson. No. Alder Paulson, no. Alder Tischler.
Yes.
Alder Tischler, aye. Alder Vetter. Alder Vetter, no. Alder Verveer. No. Alder Verveer, no. We have 2 ayes, 16 noes.
2 ayes and 16 noes, the amendment fails. And we are back to the main motion, which is to adopt the substitute. Is there further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, is there any objection to recording a unanimous vote in favor of the substitute? Alder Harrington McKinney?
No.
Alder Harrington McKinney would like to be recorded as voting no, as would Alder Wahilihi?
Yes.
All right, so with Alders Harrington McKinney, Wahilihi, and Tischler voting no, any moment I'm going to do a roll call. All right, we're going to have a roll call, folks. So all those in favor of the substitute, aye. Those opposed, no, as your name is called. And the clerk will please call the roll.
Thank you. Alder Vitever.
Aye.
Alder Vitever, aye. Alder Wahilier.
No.
Wahilier, no. Alder Bennett. Alder Bennett, aye. Alder Carter.
No.
Alder Carter, no. Alder Conklin. Aye. Alder Conklin, aye. Alder Curry. Alder Curry, aye. Alder Evers.
Aye.
Alder Evers, aye. Alder Figueroa Cole. Aye. Alder Figueroa Cole, aye. Alder Foster.
Aye.
Alder Foster, aye. Alder Furman. Aye. Alder Furman, aye. Alder Harrington McKinney. No. Alder Harrington McKinney, no. Alder Heck. Alder Heck, aye. Alder Madison. Aye. Alder Madison, aye. Alder Miadze.
Aye.
Alder Miadze, aye. Alder Paulson. Aye. Alder Paulson, aye. Alder Tischler.
No.
Alder Tischler, no. Alder Vetter. Aye. Alder Vetter, aye. Alder Verveer. Aye. Alder Verveer, aye. We have 14 ayes, 4 noes.
14 ayes, that item passes. And that is the end of our exclusions from the consent agenda. Is there anything further from the floor? Seeing nothing, Alder Vitever, it's your turn.
Move to adjourn.
Moved and seconded to adjourn. Is there any objection to recording a unanimous vote in favor of adjournment? Seeing no objection, we are adjourned.
Who had before 9 on their bingo card tonight?